Welcome to Beyond the Canvas, where we explore the profound power of art. I'm your host, Safi Uchi, an abstract expressionist who paints to heal. I'm here to share the stories of artists and creators who are using their craft to overcome challenges and inspire others. In this series, we'll go beyond the canvas, diving into the creative process, the struggles and triumphs of artists from all walks of life, and the unique ways art can heal and empower. Gabriel-Bello Diaz is a Puerto Rican artist based in Seattle, Washington. On today's episode, we will discuss his unique path to becoming an artist and the importance of supporting and inspiring others on their journeys. Welcome to Beyond the Canvas. Today, our guest is Gabriel-Bello Diaz.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm feeling pretty chill. It's a hot ass day in Seattle.
Yeah.
Coming into this interview after a really hectic summer, kind of,
Yeah.
and in a brain space of like excited for fall because fall, winter time when Seattle gets gray, that's when I'm like a hermit inside of my studio and just making art.
Right.
So I'm excited for that because in the summertime, I'm like, I want to be out in the world,
Right.
exploring things. So yeah, I'm coming into this right where we're like in the middle of like leaving summer and about to start fall in a way
Right.
that this is kind of exciting moment for me to talk to you.
So I know that you were an architect before you started art,
Yeah.
which I think is very interesting. How did that transition work for you?
The architecture academic discipline was something that really was the foundation of me as an artist, right? There was a lot of creativity and imagination and like just thinking about the world in different ways. When I was in Boston, I was at the Wentworth Institute of Technology, and while doing my architecture engineering degree, I also focused on art and architecture history. And so it was beautiful to kind of think about how art and architecture had these like very similar like moments and paths and eras that were very correlated in a way that I was always like on the research slash like history buff of art. And I had a friend of mine in our program that literally just gave me some Prismacolor pens, and he was like, I see you doodling all up in your notes, and he was like, you should just like have fun making art. So
Yeah.
like that was the start of it all for me, was that young man giving me a set of Prismacolors, and I just started making art and kind of just playing around in the background while I was doing architecture. And there was always this like artistic flow as you're designing buildings and as you're kind of being like this weird abstract creative person, right? Like it kind of like lends itself to the art world before it goes into like this very like structured, this is going to be a building, this is going to be a design that's like built. And so that was always there. So even in Boston, I had my first art show in Boston, and I threw it at my house.
Yeah.
I had like
That's the
family
best.
come over. It was really cool actually. I was like, I
Yeah.
had like all my art like in the living room, and then like
Yeah.
in the like in my bedroom, in the kitchen. It was like I had like 20 different pieces of art, and at that time it was very surrealistic. The kind of work I was doing was very dream focused. Such a cliche, but Dali was definitely one of those that were like, that stuck out to me, of just being
Yeah.
like, be weird. Like,
Yeah.
just be okay being weird.
Right.
Fast forward, moving over to Europe, going into my second master's program at the Institute of Advanced Architecture of Catalonia. Yeah, I absolutely love that space. That's where my skill set within robotics, 3D printing, laser cutting, all of that like digital fabrication came into play.
Okay.
And
I
that's
love 3D printing.
we were literally building these machines back like
Yeah.
15 years ago, before they were like a desktop future, whatever. Like we were
Right.
actually like in that research phase
Yeah.
of seeing how these processes could help with architecture construction research in a way that was like very future thinking, but sort of paving the way for a lot of the machines and the stuff that you see kind of
Yeah.
today. Very like mad scientist vibes, right?
Right.
Like, creating new materials. My final research focused on a ferrofluid that was solidified within the electromagnetic field that was attached to a robot, and it was like 3D printing and like without support systems, right?
Oh,
So
that's interesting.
there's a whole line of research that I was doing
Yeah.
around that. And so
Yeah.
that's what kind of led to me teaching. After I graduated, I started teaching some workshops and things. I was going to, University of Sydney, teaching out there some of their robotics programs. I went to the Talman College up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I was like kind of bouncing around, sort of experimenting and continuing my research before I came to Seattle.
Nice. You are this artist now. You do more of like 3D like beading and
Because of my architecture background, super comfortable with playing around in the 3D world. And so I'm like 3D modeling. And then when COVID hit, I had that VR headset where I was making stuff in 3D with like tilt brush.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like in this sort of like matrix world of painting. And I was like, now my 2D work with augmented reality becomes three-dimensional as well. Future Arts was one organization that sort of opened that door for me a little bit, like as a workflow, to go from like, hey, I know you do the 3D artwork or like the 3D modeling, and I know that you do this 2D work. This is like an opportunity to really learn the workflow between mashing those two things up, right? And so
Right.
even my 2D work feels sculptural because
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Was there like a something in your journey where you went from like, okay, I'm gonna go full-time artist and I'm gonna really engulf myself into my craft? Like,
Yeah.
was there something that happened in your life that made you like take that step?
Um, Honestly, becoming a teacher. When I first moved to Seattle, I started trying to develop like community spaces around like this sort of like education around 3D printing and like laser cutting and like all of the digital fabrication. And I was approached by a school that, wanted me to develop engineering programs for students. And then so after that happened, I ended up actually teaching at the school through a program called CTE, which is like career technical education, which I had enough experience as an engineer to be a teacher. And so at that point, I was just dabbling in things, kind of like as like I wasn't even trying to sell my art. I just loved making things because it was therapeutic and it's just beautiful sort of way to spend my time.
Right.
But then, as I'm teaching, the kids, I wanted them to have an example of like what is it like to like actually step it up and like have this be like an art form that is a business, right? So I almost by accident was like, I just want to like take my art and just kind of frame it as a business and actually go through that process so that I could then teach that to my students about like this is the path that you have to take about getting an LLC, or are you a sole practitioner, right? Like what is
Right.
the grant process like? How do you set yourself up for grant writing and for other funding in that way? And so I just put myself in that process so then I can share that with the students.
Right, right,
And
right.
that kind of just like launched in a way that I wasn't expecting. I ended up having my first LLC called Efficio, which is Latin for to design and to create, but with a purpose and like with this like sort of content behind it that was a
Yeah.
little bit more philosophical.
Yeah.
And for me, the philosophy behind all of my artwork was something that was very traditional and handmade, like sewing or painting,
Right.
and mixing that with something that was very like new technology, like 3D printing and laser cutting and now augmented reality, right? So like whatever product or whatever sort of thing that I create, there's always this mix of those two sort of perspectives coming together within like old school and new school, and this is what that
Yeah, I like
creates.
that. I like that combo. It's because you can never go wrong with keeping it, way back. Like
Yeah.
it's if it ain't
The
broken, don't
foundational.
fix it.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. So no,
yeah.
so a lot of my work, honestly, like how it started off of me branching off into just, being a solo artist and being sort of running my life in that direction was inspired by my students because I just wanted them to see what that looked like and what that
Yeah.
could be in a way
Yeah.
that I just didn't really have access to. So I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do that myself.
That's a beautiful thing. Like being that vessel for others because you have that knowledge and you know exactly what you're looking for, what you want to do, and then you just apply it and everybody follows along and
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah, yeah.
Any life challenges that you faced along your art journey?
Yeah, some of it's a little on the somber side, some of it's health reasons, but I think the connecting thread is that throughout my life, I've always sort of like moved around, right? So I'm a Jersey boy,
Yeah.
first and foremost. I'm a Puerto Rican Jersey boy.
Yeah.
Um, but I was actually born in London, and then I moved to North Carolina, and then it was Jersey. Spent most of my youth in Jersey. And then for my undergrad, I moved to Boston, and then from there, I, ended up shifting all the way to Europe, into Germany for a while, and then to Barcelona. And so, like, I think the challenge was I never felt settled, and I never felt like this is where I want to actually lay roots down. And so I felt like such a nomad throughout my 20s, and in my 30s, I came to Seattle, and Seattle allowed me to find my footing in a way that, being East Coast Puerto Rican, you can be Afro-Caribbean, you can be like, white presenting Puerto Rican. A lot of my family and community around me, it was like, you're just Boricua, you're just Puerto Rican, that's it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But coming over here, there was such like a dissection of identity because there's so much like, you know, I want to say this very respectfully, but like there's just a lot of like, you know, land back and acknowledgement and things like
Mhm.
that that I think really, because I saw such a surface level thinking in that aspect, I was like,
Mhm.
well, what is my authentic way of understanding my identity, right? Like my mother is definitely, you know, West African, Puerto Rican. My father is
Mhm.
definitely more Portuguese, Puerto Rican, right?
Mhm.
You know, you have not federally recognized tribes like the
Mhm.
Taino, and like those are things that I started questioning
Mhm.
that started influencing my art in a
Yeah.
way that I was like, this is my first time actually like doing some Puerto Rican shit with my art, right? It was
Right.
always like on the surface level,
Right.
always like something that was like me responding to something else, or me kind of like, because I was in these very different environments and different worlds, I always kind of looked at what was it like for just myself being in those environments, but it was never culturally driven. And
Mhm.
so when I came to Seattle, I feel like I started finally feeling like I'm actually dissecting myself and my
Mhm.
being
Yeah.
with a little bit of more intent that happens to be very like family focused, very like, you know, Puerto
Mhm.
Rican focused. And so a lot of the artwork that I'm doing right now really has that layer to it in one way
Yeah.
or another, that I
Yeah.
feel like now I feel settled because I feel like I
You
know
kind of know like why you're doing what you're doing. You
exactly.
have your why.
Exactly. I have
Yeah.
my why.
You have your
And I
why.
never had my why
Yeah.
before this time.
Yeah. When I first started painting, it was a chase. Like I was like, I wanted something deeper.
Yeah.
And I knew that like I can paint and I can express and I can, do all those things, but I'm like, what is it that I want to do, for the community or like for, my own healing
Yeah.
because of the things I've went through and the trauma that I've been through. Like how can I continue to heal that through art? Because I started painting to heal. It was therapy for me. So I was asking those questions to myself. And it's like once you find the root in your story, it's a beautiful thing
It
because it's
clicks
like
in a way
it
that's
just
like, it
clicks
makes
and it
sense.
just like now you have your why and then everything else spider webs off of that why and
Yeah.
it becomes like this just great thing
Yeah.
for just anyone that, encounters you, your art and yeah, I got my why.
Got my why.
So that's all I need, you know. Have you had any challenges along your art journey? Is there any stories that you can tell?
Yeah, I think the monetization of my art was the biggest challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It really started off with like me being like, I want to show my students like this is what a business out of like creating whatever's in your mind, what that looks like. And that was cute for a while. But then it was like, I remember having a store that was selling my products and they were like, your product sold out. We want the same thing. And I was like, I don't want to make the fucking same thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to sit here and make suspenders and like that's not really like
Yeah.
it was cute, and then it kind
Mm-hmm.
of like got out of control
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
way where I was like, I don't want to keep making the same
Yeah.
thing over and over, right? And so
Yeah.
it became a moment where I was like, do I continue being solo artist and, you know, applying to grants, trying to do the hustle, trying to make the same thing, trying to be palatable for all the things,
Yeah.
or you know, do I use my actual other art, other my skill sets
Yeah.
to actually have more of a stable life? I'm someone who definitely is in need of insurance
Yeah.
for bare minimum my asthma. I'm
Yeah.
like, that shit ain't cheap. So I'm like, I need insurance. And so I
Right.
was like, in the artist world, it
Mm-hmm.
was not,
Right.
it was
Right.
not cute because I didn't
Yeah.
have that stability, right? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have that kind of, you know, insurance, like the financial stability is fine. I could pay my bills, I could pay my rent.
Yeah.
But then it was like, there was other things that I was like, I'm not able to save up for a future. I'm not
Yeah.
able to like really lean into it in a way that was giving me the funds that I knew I deserved. Right? I got a bachelor's and two masters. I should be making six figures no matter what.
Right.
But here I
Yeah.
was, like, you know, at a, you know, a cute, humble salary,
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah.
through grant writing and through things like that, that it was fine, but it just, I knew it wasn't enough, and so I kind of pivoted into the nonprofit world.
Mm-hmm.
I pivoted into art admin, being, you know, program director
Mm-hmm.
right now. You know, being managers at certain points of my career as well. Like that felt like it was stable, and I was giving back to art community,
Yeah.
and I was able to actually do that through the lens of an artist as well.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, because it's like kind of low stakes,
Mm-hmm.
not low stakes, but it was like I still had enough energy
Right.
to then still produce art the way I wanted to, and I wasn't financially dependent on my art, which was
Mm-hmm.
like it took a while for me to like accept that because it felt like a sense of failure, but at
Mm-hmm.
the same time it gave me the balance, that exactly what I needed. It's like here I
Mm-hmm.
am being able to be paid to support a variety of different art communities and different ways of like educating folks within art. So that's
Yeah.
like youth education really fell into that.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship and teaching like sort of that sort of foundational work within like engineering and prototyping, like that was very fulfilling.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was giving back. And then I
Yeah.
still had time to just be an artist. But again, my bills weren't depend on my art. And so that's what allowed me to really
Yeah.
explore different mediums and be very almost careless and carefree
Yeah.
and, choosing these different disciplines, right? Like having that opportunity to really be like, I can just take up this discipline and I'm not like trying to make money off of it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when I do that discipline, what ends up happening is what's made my art career, I think, successful was that I would showcase these different projects and then
Mm-hmm.
work with clients and work with people to like customize something for them specifically around these skill sets, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I would have a client, like my most recent one, who saw my beadwork and he's like, Gabo, you're gonna be my suit jacket for this gala I'm going to.
Mm.
And it was like one of my most beautiful moments where I'm like, I love being seen for my artwork, but what I love more, because my artwork is personal, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is me exploring myself, my identity, just kind of really diving into that in a really personal level. And so like
Mm-hmm.
even when I make shit, I'm just like, I don't want to sell it. I'm like,
Right.
I've
Right.
made this for me in a
Yeah.
way.
So when you're so when
um,
you're attached to your art, like how do you use your art with therapy? Like what's that process look like to you?
yeah, my art starts off with like this explosion of an idea, and then I go back into research. And the research part is the therapy part, and the explosion of art is also the therapy part.
Yeah.
There is an art narrative that I have been working on for the past 8 years.
Yeah.
It's called Ava 83110. It's
Mm-hmm.
a narrative of this girl and this robot.
Mm-hmm.
And Ava is the name of my niece, and
Yeah.
83110 is Bello, but like with
Mm-hmm.
with numbers. And that's my
Mm.
nephew, right? And
Yeah.
so just sort of seeing like this like brother sister relationship of like
Mm-hmm.
this girl and this robot,
Mm-hmm.
and the sort of narrative is they're exploring this like futurism world of Puerto Rico where it's like history has happened, we're like 100 years in the future, and like they're connecting in a way that's like very supportive
Mm-hmm.
and very much like they're investigating who their family is, and like because they're kind of like lost, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so there's these two lost sort of characters that are finding themselves in this new world. And what that does to me is that I'm now researching history of Puerto Rico, history of Tainos, and like finding
Mm.
these like really
Yeah.
symbolic things that I'm pulling into the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding a lot of history within Puerto Rico that I'm pulling into this narrative, and also dreaming about what would a future world of Puerto Rico look like, because right now it's
Mm-hmm.
not cute. It's like we are in
Yeah.
this like limbo colonial state.
Not cute.
It's not cute. Like it is just,
Yeah.
oh my God, I don't even want to, that's a whole other interview, right?
Right.
But
Right.
like at the end of the day, right, like that's where art becomes very therapeutic, where I'm using it as a way to like research my identity, research my family history.
Mm-hmm.
I think about my niece and my nephew daily.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just because of that. I just think
Yeah.
about them daily, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, I see a picture of them being really cute on a
Yeah.
family vacation that
Yeah.
like I'm all over here, but like they just had a family
Right.
vacation. I see this picture of them. I'm like, that's a cute moment for
Mm-hmm.
Ava 83110, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's fun to explore my art through this personal identity and
Mm-hmm.
sort of this like family history way. Um, and honestly, like that direction came because I moved here to Seattle, and there was like this like overabundance
Mm-hmm.
of indigenous sort of like history that
Mm-hmm.
in Puerto Rico, a lot of that's already been burned, already been lost,
Right.
already been stolen in a way that like we can't really like latch onto it. And the books and stuff that I was reading were just kind of like too horrific to like really go through as like something positive to like look into my
Mm-hmm.
background. And I know it's not all going to be positive, but it was like
Mm-hmm.
it was very hard. And so doing that through an art lens, doing that through something that was more of a storytelling moment, and then infusing my like skills like within robotics and just like art and all of that coming together within
Mm-hmm.
this one project. And even right now, I just finished a mural where that's going to be like this augmented reality mural situation, right?
Mm.
Like this becomes where like the mixed media is really creating this one narrative that
Yeah.
feels really cohesive in a way that all of these skill sets before felt very chaotic and very like independent. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
like now I'm finding this storyline that's connecting all of these skill
Yeah.
sets that I have
Yeah.
together in a way that I love it.
I love the storytelling part of it. I love that you're adding that three-dimensional storytelling to what you're inspired by. Like that is
Thank you.
what definitely needs to be put out there in the world. I think it it brings interest. It brings a whole different perspective to just your roots, you know, and it's good. Like it's a creative way to think about it. Like I think that way too. Like I think about like how can I, when I story tell, what kind of symbols and motifs can I put in my artwork that,
Absolutely. I
you
love your
know,
work because of that, and I resonate with your work because I see a lot of like my thinking and how you're approaching your work very similar in that sort of like extraction of your own identity and extraction of your own sort of culture in a way that spills into it, but just differently, right? Like
yeah,
it's through your
different.
lens.
Yeah, yeah, through my lens. Yeah, and I was kind of like in a battle too with like in that season where I was like, okay, what feels comfortable to me? You know, I'm Native American and we have our Coast Salish work, we have our traditional, you know, Native American work, and it feels good, you know, to keep those symbols and elements in my work, but I also am very abstract too. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to be constricted to, you know, one, you know, just what we're used to seeing. So, and this feels better to me. It's like being abstract and being expressive. And I find my best work when I'm like stressed the fuck out.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, when I'm depressed, like I will be in the studio and I will just go
Hands
for it and
down.
I will just paint and I will just, you know, release. I will crank the music up and I will just let it all out. And I tell you, like after I do that, I feel like free, I feel better, and it's almost like just like that outlet for me, like
Yeah.
just to release it. And when I bottle it in, because I don't talk to a lot of people about, you know, what I'm going through or what I'm experiencing. And
Yeah.
so art is kind of like that, you know, door
Yeah.
to like be able to release it on the canvas. And then when you create a masterpiece, you're like, okay, this is my story. This is how I was feeling in that moment. You can share with other people. And that brings me peace. That brings me like,
I feel like in that same sense, you're able to also like find closure
mm,
with that moment and with that emotion. Like, obviously, we're going to continue having emotions. Like, life's fucking crazy, right? But,
right.
like, in those moments where you're like, this is something that I'm holding on to, like, being
Mm-hmm.
able to release that into your art
Right.
really becomes so that kind of like level of therapy that really only artists understand because it's like then you're just like able to let it go, which is why it's hard for me to sell my art sometimes because I'm like, nah, this shit's
Right.
like super personal to me.
Right.
Like
Right.
I remember crying while making this, or like just
Yeah.
like all these emotions that are kind of mixed within the creation of it
Mm-hmm.
becomes really personal. And like shout out to artists that are able to just be like and sold,
Right.
because like
Right.
that is very maybe even cathartic in a way where it's like that's part of the process of healing. That's part of the process as a human being that we need, and not everyone has access to that sort
Mm-hmm.
of outlet, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's part of my mission too, is like working with Indigenous youth on how do we express ourselves
Yeah,
through art? How do we channel those emotions? Because growing up on the reservation, it's so isolated. I mean, literally, it's like I think I was surrounded by like 15 homes at the time. They did build new homes at the top, but everybody's related to everybody, you know?
yeah,
And you're about 30 minutes from the city. You're just stuck. Like it's like school home, and then not really much of a dating life because like everybody's related.
yeah. You're like not the
So,
cousins.
right, not the cousins. Oh wait. Are you my first cousin?
Yeah,
Because if you're my third, it's okay.
I can't. I can't. That is definitely res life right
Right, it's a
there.
res life. So, coming back to that, I think it's important for indigenous multicultural youth to like channel their energy through some type of creative process.
Oh, for sure.
We're prone to, you know, drugs, alcohol. It's like it's there. It's nothing to do. So I think a lot of that our culture just runs to other outlets that are accessible
Yeah.
to them, and it's easy to get, and it's sad.
Honestly, growing up in Jersey, not too different.
Yeah.
I had family members, I had friends around me choosing a certain way of life, and shout out to my mom because if mom wasn't like, you will not, I'm gonna
Right.
whoop your ass if you do. But also, it was very much like education is your way
Right.
out of here.
Right.
And she was
That's
very
good.
much like, I mean, my family was either like military or medical field in certain ways, right? And so for me to be like, I'm going to be an architect and like kind of creative, but like it was safe because of engineering and whatever the case was, right? Like I had both of my parents' support, which an absolute blessing
Yeah.
because if not for them pushing me into that direction, I could have easily fallen into like a couple of groups that were like just right next door to me. That I
Right.
was friends with them.
Right.
Like I was like I could have easily been sucked into that narrative in a way, but also I saw that as a way as like I saw folks that were older and
Yeah.
I saw like the repercussions of those choices. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely want all my teeth. I absolutely want
Right.
a life that's not this. And
Right.
and so I got to see that so close and so upfront
Mm-hmm.
that as sad as it was definitely something that I knew I didn't want for myself.
Yeah.
And the only sort of thought process of how to not do that was my
Mm-hmm.
mom being like, education is the way. And so,
Yeah.
um, even going to Boston was kind of serendipitous in a way where I was like, I had applied to 3 colleges and I was like, who's going to give me the most money? That was
Right.
it. Boston gave me the most money. I was like, off to Boston. Here we go. It
Right.
was hard because I missed family. I missed community. I was like,
Yeah.
Mom, I want to come back. She was like, absolutely the fuck not. You're staying over there. You're going to finish this degree.
Mm.
That summer I came back and I was like, teach me how to cook food though.
Right.
Because I was like,
College life.
but that's where I learned my love of cooking,
Yeah.
and all Puerto Rican food. I literally woke up this morning and made me some tostones and a fried egg. And
Mm.
I had a little cafe bustelo, and it was just like, I felt like Jersey again.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that like the roots of your community and like what that means and like what it means to like actually not escape but like not fall into those kind of patterns was really
Mm-hmm.
important for me to be a teacher in a way where like I brought that into my classroom because this is like federal way where kids are just kind of like everyone's dealing with some shit.
Right.
Hands down, everyone's got like a narrative where it's like
Yeah.
no one's living a pretty fun, like, I mean, there were some kids that were just like maybe a little bit better off than others, but for the
Yeah.
most part, I wanted these kids to really see creativity as a way that's like a way that they could choose
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't just like be a doctor, be this. It's like actually be whatever the fuck you want to be, but like let's be smart about being that, right? Let's find ways where that's financially stable for you to make those decisions, even
Right.
if it was like an artist career or even if it's like a
Right.
full career in architecture. Like I want you to actually understand what those decisions mean
Right.
and realize that some of our families won't understand that as a career path, right? Like I was really fortunate for my parents to understand architecture as a career path, but especially when it comes to being an artist, I got so many friends, so many people that are like, my mom absolutely, or like just it wasn't a supportive thing because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, do you want to be starving? That narrative of the
Mm-hmm.
starving artist
Mm-hmm.
is abundant in our community. Like
Yeah.
that's not like really a smart choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Same.
think it's important to share that there are paths where that is very successful, that is
Mm-hmm.
very lucrative in a way, and also it's very like healing. It's something that is therapy for me in a way that I'm like,
Yeah.
if that's where you're happy, let's
Yeah.
find out how you
How
can
you
pay rent
can,
being happy.
yeah, how you
Like,
can, yeah, because it is. The starving artist is a real thing.
yeah,
Yeah. So when you can find those other avenues to help support that, it becomes like this machine. Now you know how to write grants, you know how to
yeah.
apply to certain galleries, you know how to get out there. And what advice would you give to like an artist that doesn't know about those type of resources?
There's an abundance of platforms that are really supportive that way, but also there's a perspective with your art that I think you need to decide where you're at. Like where you want to compromise, like what is
Right.
okay for you to do and like what are you just like, I'm absolutely not going to do that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
where does like your art spill into other industries? Where does it spill into other mediums? And are you open to that? And honestly, you can say no and still be very like headstrong, but just like know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you work in some ambiguity, then it's like, okay, well, now I know exactly what kind of grant to go for because I know exactly what kind of artist I am or what I'm trying to achieve and what I'm trying to do, right? And so you're able to like really see specific opportunities for what they are versus like grasping at like, let me change my art to like manipulate to this grant. Creating your value system
Mm-hmm.
and your sort of like aspirations and having that being really concrete, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like is really hard to do. But I think being really specific about what that means for you
Mm-hmm.
actually creates the stability of like knowing exactly how to search for your opportunities. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're just like artist grant, you're gonna
Right.
be all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
You will be lost in a world of like, I don't even know how to build my portfolio for this, or
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 different portfolios.
Yeah.
Like my portfolios
I
are
think I
very
read like 4
specific.
different bios. I'm
Because
like,
one's like this bio
this
is for like
bio
this path. This
was
one's
at
for
least a
this one.
chapter. I was like, highlight, okay, this is good. That's good.
But see, there's a through line through all my
Yeah.
bios, right? And that's definitely like this this idea of hand craftsmanship, like old school techniques, you know, symbolism and textiles and textures within like my own background and my culture, and then mix that with newer technology, right? So even that, like the architecture rail system,
Yeah.
um, when you're gonna go and see that piece, once it's finally finished next year, you're gonna put your phone to it and a whole like 3D model is gonna come out between the staircase. So like I'm still able to express myself within those projects, but it's like I know exactly how I had to pitch that project
Right.
in order to get it in a way that like if I'm like doing everything and anything, I probably wouldn't have gotten that project. But I had to be hyper specific because I do have such an array of skill sets that it could be very confusing to be like, wait, but you're beating, and then like also I see that you had a fashion show, but like now you want to do this mural
Yeah.
that's gonna be a 3D thing, and it's like, I have those skills.
Right. Right. Mixed media artists.
Mixed media artist. It's
Yeah.
like I'm not just like, oh, I do watercolor and then crayon, mixed
Right.
media. It's like no,
Right.
like I'm here to really be like very dimensional with mixed
Right.
media in a way that is
Right.
really hard for people to understand. And so that was one
Yeah.
of my biggest struggles was like how to present myself as an artist.
But it's
Yeah.
good. Like you can express yourself in all these different mediums, and the why goes all back to one.
Yeah.
And so it's just the beauty of it with the beading and with the 3D and with the 2D. And it's like, it's all still like the same artist, the
It's all
same
still
story,
Gabo.
the same
Yeah.
Gabo. Still the same Gabo.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that that's amazing. Where do you feel in your season right now with your art and like with your
I'm in a phase of like almost being okay to start from scratch. And I say that because like I've had pockets of like, I'm just gonna do this leather thing, I'm just gonna do this 2D thing, I'm just gonna do this bead thing. And now it's like, how does all of this mix? And that feels really not understood as like what the final product would be. And I've always been like product and focus. And right now I'm kind of delving into a bit of rawness where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna create in this next year, but I know it's gonna be a mix of all these things in a way that I can start seeing some vision of what that looks like, and it looks very something I haven't seen before, and that's what scares me, right? It's very untraditional. It's something that like when you're talking about leather work with beading and augmented reality, someone would look at me and be like, "What the fuck are you creating?" And I was like, "I don't know." And I'm okay, but the thing is like I'm strong enough as an artist to say I'm okay that I don't know. I trust my process, I trust my skill set, in a way that I'm excited to figure out what I create. And so like this interview is actually capturing me like right before I fully dive into that like completely.
yeah.
I just don't know where it's gonna go. And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of
Yeah.
excited for
Yeah.
that, to be
That
honest. But
that
also I'm like, what am I going to create,
Yeah.
right? Like this is
Yeah.
a very new space that I'm in right now.
Yeah. It's a new chapter,
Yeah.
a new journey that's getting ready to flourish and open up. It's gonna be amazing. And I think anything when you're starting fresh and it's always a good thing.
Yeah, it definitely feels like recalibrating in a way where I'm not trying to just do one thing or another. It's like, Gabriel, embrace your whole self and see what's created when you do that. And I
Yeah.
think that's why I'm both nervous and because I've never been that public with my artwork. It's always been like, because it's been a product that I know is palatable, I'm like, I'm gonna make that because someone already told me they wanted that. So I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
And right now I'm spending time creating shit that nobody ever asked for. I'm just making
Right.
things that I wanna do.
What you want to do.
Yeah.
And that's what's good for the soul.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that part.
Where can people find your work?
People will be able to find my work. They can't find it. You can, but it's still secluded in my heart in certain ways. But my IG,
Yeah.
Gabriel-Bello Diaz, is something that I would say could come across as very narcissistic. It's literally just profiles of my face and like me and a thing. But a little link right there on my bio will take you to my website, and that's where you start seeing a lot of the complexity of my work. You'll see books that I've been publishing with my robotic engineering research. You'll see my work as an architect. You'll see my work as a painter, as a beater. You'll see some 3D printed penises that I did for the Seattle Erotic Art Festival. Like you're gonna see like the complexity of Gabriel like
Yeah.
making art.
Yeah.
Now I say that because there is definitely a rebranding happening where you know, now I'm really looking at how to categorize myself as an artist in a way that like I want to really share the next step, which brings everything together. Moving forward as Gabo and being myself as an artist, you're going to start seeing a little bit of me branching out into that direction, which I'm really excited for.
I'm excited for you. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Canvas. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to catch more, please like and subscribe. Thank you.